So far, I've shown you only a couple of ways that you can generate geometry, either using primitives or using generators and splines. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to volume modeling, which is, I think, one of the most fun and easy ways to model. And we'll use it to create some really cool stylized coral for our crab's bowl and kind of decorate it up a little bit. So again, we're going to compartmentalize. We're going to create a new project by clicking on this plus button here. And again, we're going to use splines to kind of draw our coral shape. Okay, so what we're going to do, and just like we created a fishbowl, generated a fishbowl with that lathe object, we're also going to use a generator, the volume mesher, to generate a piece of geometry from our spline. So what we're not going to do is use our spline pen tool like we did before, because what I want is a little bit more of an organic kind of shape. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to delete this spline. I'm going to go, and if I click and hold, you can see there is this sketch tool. So you can think of the spline pen tool as like your actual pen tool in, say, Illustrator, and the sketch tool is a little bit more like the pencil tool inside of Illustrator. So this allows us to get a little bit more organic and, dare I say, sketchy type of spline. So I'm going to grab the sketch tool here, and you can see there are these three options. The most important option is the stroke smoothing here, and it's set to 50, and this is basically going to smooth out whatever spline you draw. So if I go and I draw this like this, you can see I had a little bit too much coffee today. This is a little bit too wobbly, but if we up the stroke smoothing to, say, like 75, and we try again, you can see, all right, that's a little bit better. Now, one of the cool things about this as well is there's some other tools in this little drop-down menu as well. One being the spline smooth tool, that if you are hyped up on caffeine, you can go in and just kind of smooth everything out. And there you go. And this is super helpful. It's actually going to remove points as well. So if you're familiar with a lot of the tools inside of Illustrator and how you can draw splines, you can smooth out splines, Cinema 4D has very similar tools, so you'll feel right at home. So we have our spline. Now what I'm going to do is go back into my pen menu here, grab that sketch tool, and just start sketching again. And you'll see that this is just going to draw splines in that same spline object. Now, if for whatever reason you want to create a new spline every time you draw a new stroke, you can check this on, this create new spline, and every new spline you create will generate a new spline object here. Okay, so super handy. But what I'm going to do is let's actually just go and undo all that, because what we want to do is we'll stick with this main spline here and go back into our sketch pen options and uncheck this create new spline, because what we want to do is basically create nice organic branches to create a nice little bit of coral here. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do is, if I look at my kind of all my views here, it's always important to look and see what's going on here. And I would actually say, you know, let's go and grab these points here so it's a little bit more straight and it's not kind of curving off the way there. I could delete this point here, and so maybe something like that, and maybe have this main point right down here. And so we got a nice little bit of a straight type of coral branch now. So we'll go back into our sketch, and if I just try to draw here, you're gonna see that this is just kind of floating in space. What would be great is if every time I drew a new spline, that base of that spline would snap to the original spline we have here. So I'm going to undo that, and keyword there was snap. And so we could actually go and turn on our snapping here. And if we go to the little gear icon to check out our snap settings, what we want to do is make sure spline snapping is on, because of course we want to snap to our spline. So I'm just going to close out of that window. And now if I click, you'll see, okay, there is my little spline snap. And if I draw, you can see that that spline, as I drew out, snapped to the existing spline. I have this really cool branch now. So I can do the same thing here. And now the one thing you want to do is, we're in 3D space, so you definitely want to, you know, give this a little bit of 3D depth. So maybe we go here and we have a branch come out like that. So we get a little bit of depth there. And maybe we go down here and have this a bigger branch like so. And then we have a branch maybe going out like this, and maybe one like this. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Again, we can always go back into the spline smooth tool and kind of go in there, clean things up a little bit. So there's a little bit something like that. And so I would say this is looking pretty good for a nice quick sketch of a spline that is ultimately going to be our coral. Now, again, we just have a spline object here. And if I go to render this, of course, this isn't going to render anything at all, because just like a path in After Effects, you're not going to see it in a render unless you stroke it with something, okay? Same thing in Illustrator. If you just have a path and you don't fill it with anything, you don't stroke it with a certain thickness or something like that, you're not going to see anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and we're going to generate geometry off of this spline using something called a volume builder and a volume mesher. Okay, so those objects are in this little menu here. And again, color coding, very important. They're green, which means they are generator objects, which mean they generate new geometry based off of existing objects. So let's go and first get the volume builder. And again, we need to make this spline a child of that volume builder. And you can see that looks great. Just looks like a perfect coral, say maybe if we were in Minecraft. But what you're seeing now is basically voxels. So what the volume builder is doing is it's generating voxels based off of whatever object is in the objects list here, which is the spline. So whatever you place underneath this volume builder, it's automatically going to show up in this objects list, and it's going to generate voxels off it. So voxels, basically 3D pixels, and you can see they're very big. But if we adjust this voxel size, and you don't want to go too low, so I'm going to bring this to say 1, you can see basically, okay, we have like a deformed Michelin man or something like that doing a high kick. And basically what's going on is the lower we make the voxel size, the higher the resolution we have here. So just like if we had a high resolution image, you have a lot more pixels packed in there, so you're going to get a higher detailed image. So same thing with voxels. The higher the density, the smaller the voxel size, the more high quality, the more high resolution the resulting voxel volume, okay? So if I select this spline object here, we're gonna actually see what's going on behind the scenes. So when you throw a spline object into a volume builder, what it's gonna do is it's going to create a bunch of spheres at a certain size, which is a size of 15 centimeters here, and then it's going to basically clone those spheres along that spline to create the resulting volume. So the radius here is controlling those spheres, and then the density is controlling how many of those spheres are being cloned along those splines. So if we up the density here and we lower the radius to a nice spot here, you can see exactly what's going on. Now this is a little chunky, especially where the splines kind of meet the base of the other spline. So what we can do, all right, so right now, again, we still don't have anything that we can render, because this is just generating voxels, and voxels do not render unless we mesh them, okay? So what we're gonna do is we are gonna go back into our volume menu here and go to volume mesher, and we'll place the volume builder underneath the volume mesher. And what the mesher is doing is it's doing what it's saying it's doing. It's aptly named. It's creating a mesh based on the volume that we fed into it. And now if we were to render, you can see that we actually have a mesh that will show up. Just like so. Okay, so we have a mesh we can deal with, and you'll notice that this is looking a little bit chunky. We can smooth things out a little bit. And one of the cool things about the volume builder, volume mesher, is in the volume builder, we can use these different modifiers or kind of like adjustment layers. And so there's this SDF smooth, which basically just smooths out your voxels, almost like a Gaussian blur. So if we add that, you can see that it's applied on top. Again, if this was applied below, it's only going to affect objects that are underneath it, again, just like an adjustment layer. So if we go and place this above, you can see it smooths it out. And you can see even the operator says it's a Gaussian kind of blur. So just like a Gaussian blur on 3D pixels versus 2D pixels. So we got the voxel distance, how far is this getting blurred out, and then the iterations, which just basically multiplies this effect, okay? So I think this is looking pretty good like this. This is nice and smooth and stylized, looking pretty good. And the cool thing is that anytime we can go into our spline and just adjust things if we want to, okay? So I have snapping still on, so I can turn that off, but I can still adjust splines and all this kind of good stuff, turn all of this back on, and you can see that this is all going to update live. So this is not destructive at all. We can adjust things as much as we can to our heart's content, and tweak. So our client, Mr. Krabby, is happy, okay? So I wanted to show you just one other tip to help you adjust spline. So let's just say I wanted to adjust all of this spline here. One thing I could do is select the base of the spline and hit U, which brings up a whole bunch of modeling commands, and then W, which is going to select connected. And what this is going to do is select all of those connected points, and now I can go and just move this however I want. Now, we're not going to need to be too precise because what we're going to end up doing anyways is just having this be meshed all together. So I can have this all the way out here floating, and as long as this is kind of close enough to the main mesh, this is going to look fine, even though when I turn off the volume builder volume mesher, we have a little bit of a gap here. So super helpful to be able to grow selections, or you can just hit the 0 key to get your rectangular selection, which is up here, and just make a rectangular selection with point mode active, and then just move things around that way. So it all depends on like how hard is it to make a selection here without selecting other objects. So you have multiple ways now. So UI, and move that around, and we'll turn this back on. Now, if I hit N and then B, you can see, again, this is a very dense mesh, just like our mesh that we use to generate our rocks. And so just like we use the remesher to bring the polygon count down, so again, these corals are going to be pretty small and far away from our camera. So what we're going to do is, with our volume mesher selected, I'm going to go back to our menu here, get our remesh, again hold the Alt or Option key down to make that a parent of our selected volume mesher here. And again, this is just going to, by default, keep the mesh density but create a nicer polygon flow. But what we're going to do is we're going to see how low we can go here, and I'm going to bring this down to 5%. And you can see this is looking a lot nicer as far as a clean mesh, and you can see the before and after. I think if anything, maybe I would adjust this spline so it's not kind of blobbing together here, but for demonstration purposes, this is looking pretty good. And I'll hit N and then A to go back to Garage Sitting with Outlines. And we can just say, okay, this is now our coral generator. So I'll go to Save As. And just like we saved out our rock generator, we can make this our coral generator. So we can always refer back to this. And I'm going to go and then make this editable, make this into a solid piece of geometry that's not being generated, again, because the more you use these generators, the more it's going to be calculating in your scene. So again, we're going to go down to this option here, current state to object, and that will create, if I go to my model mode, move this off to the side, that's going to create our baked down mesh, and this will just be Coral 1. And now what we can do is we can go and generate a whole new spline. So I'll delete this spline and I'll go back to my sketch tool, and let's make another spline here. So again, I'll go turn on snapping, make sure spline is active, and we're good, and quickly make another spline here, another bit of coral, get our spline smooth there, and let's just say that's looking good. Now what we're going to do is place this underneath the volume builder, and you can see, oh, wait a minute, what just happened here? This is looking very anemic. It looks more like a tree than a piece of coral. So let's go into our volume builder. And so because we applied a new object in here, it's applying it on top of our SDF smooth, okay? And it just reset all of the settings here. So the radius is small and the density has changed as well. So if I bring this below the SDF smooth, you can see the radius is so small that that blur is just blurring everything out, it's smoothing everything out. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the size of the radius here, and I can actually turn off that remesh so it's not constantly calculating as I'm adjusting this. We want to make sure we have the same kind of thickness as our original kind of coral there. And really, this is looking a lot too similar to this other one, so I could go and change up the splines and all that good stuff. But again, for demonstration purposes, this is good enough. We'll go and place this in the remesher, and you can see we got a nice light mesh. We will go and either go down here and get current state to object, or right click, go to current state to object, and we have our second bit of coral. So Coral 2. And again, we can make as many corals as we want, creating new splines, adjusting them, creating a volume off of it, meshing it, and then remeshing it to our heart's content, or to our crab's content. So what we're going to do is we'll select both of these corals, Command and Control C to copy, and then Command and Control V to paste this into our little fishbowl scene. where we will again place all of these objects in the next video. So volume modeling makes the ability to model something very accessible, because there's no way I would have been able to model this by hand and creating such a nice polygon flow without all of these different tools that we just covered in this video. Because I'm not that great at traditional modeling, but that's kind of the great thing, is that these tools, Volume Builder, Volume Mesher, Remesher, makes this type of more advanced type of modeling very accessible to anyone, even if you're a beginner. So this is definitely a feature that I could do an entire course on, but I encourage you to dive deeper on your own and discover what the Volume Builder and Volume Mesher can do.